It's, yep.
Oh, it's time. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are the Owatonna School Board. This is Monday. It's December 9th, 5:30. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Eric, if you would, our attendance.
Aaron will be with us tonight, and Deborah had something where she might make it.
Let's hope that she's able to do so. Let's start our meeting tonight with the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I ask for a motion for the approval of the agenda, I would just like to make sure that everybody understands tonight, we're going to pause our meeting at 6 o'clock for the truth and taxation. And we can't start it before 6 o'clock, but as close as we can at 6 or slightly thereafter. We're going to pause the meeting, we'll have truth and taxation, and after truth and taxation, we'll resume our meeting. With that, we'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 4 tonight is Mission Moment. Mr. Elstad, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'd like to ask Mark Ochterkirk to please come up to the front. You're not getting away in the back row tonight, Mr. Ochterkirk. Tonight we are honoring Mark Ochterkirk for being named the Region 1AA Activities Director of the Year. Mark is an amazing activities director, coach, and mentor to students at Owatonna High School. He works extremely hard to ensure successful experiences for our students, coaches, and advisors in all of our high school activities and athletics. Mark took on the role as activities director in 2018 after serving as a math teacher at the high school for 23 years. His exceptional organizational skills and ability to solve problems are central to his success. While fielding successful teams is always fun and exciting, Mark knows the most important purpose of athletics and activities is to develop better young women and men. The wide variety of opportunities we offer allows students to connect with peers and adults outside of the classroom, which enriches their high school experience. Thank you, Mark, for all you do for our students, coaches, and advisors, and congratulations on the very well-deserved honor of Region 1AA Activities Director of the Year. The board?
Yeah. I, by way of introduction, Mr. Ochterkirk's daughter was a nominee for the Kyle DeCam Leadership Award. And as we sat in the interviews and had a chance to talk to each of the kids, Ayub was one of the nominees as well. And as we were interviewing Mark's daughter, she was asked, who's a mentor? Who's a significant person in your life? And she talked about her dad. And one of the other questions was, tell us about something that you struggle with. Ironically, she said, well, I kind of struggle with my math. So then when we married the two together and we said, when you ask your dad for help with math, what's that like? And she said, well, it can be a little intense. But I've had great admiration for Mark Ochterkirk the entire time that I've known him as a member of the staff here at the Owatonna Public School System. We're honored to have you a part of our system. I'd turn it over to anybody else with any comments.
Mark, I just have to say, I can't believe it's been 6 years. It seems like just the other day, you were coming forward and taking this role, and we were so excited, and here it's 6 years later. Can you, I know there have been many, activities and new things, but tell us about a couple of the new things that have begun under your leadership, because I know there's more than, I can think of a couple, but.
Mark, can you pull the microphone close to you?
And you got to push a little button to it and make it like, there you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't be modest. Feel free to brag right now. Don't be
Yeah,
modest.
what's your favorite? Or tell us.
I will say one of my favorite things of the year that we implemented when we started is when we have our adaptive floor hockey kids come to the high school is one of the most special nights of the year. And it's one night, but it's just one of the coolest things to have all of our other activities come and support the kids, our community that comes out, the band, cheerleaders. And it was always pushed previous that, we can't find a night, or it's tough on the gym floor, or whatever the case might be. But it's just such a neat event And so many people pull together to make that happen. We, go to the hockey rink and we get the bumpers from them so that we can pull it off in that gym floor. And that it's just, I think that night kind of exemplifies Owatonna and what we stand for and what we do for all our kids. And the excitement that they, and at the new high school last year, and they had the big boards up, and then when we scored the goal and we had the horn going like the Wild game, the kids were just going crazy. So we have other teams like, yep, we'll be here next year. It's like, well, we come to you next year on the rotation. Nope, we want to come back to Owatonna for this. We don't ever get to see anything like this, and our kids don't get to experience this with a full pep band and the full cheerleading squad. So that's just one highlight that I
Nice.
really enjoy.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate
Absolutely.
Well, and I sincerely appreciate the fact that when we've asked you to come to board meetings and speak about the students in our school system that are multiple activity kids, and you've brought it to our attention time and again that these are the students that really lift up the entire student body, that
Absolutely.
they exemplify the best of what we have, and here you are steering the entire process. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. I would be really remiss not to make it very clear that this is a shared award. Nancy Benson is an incredible administrative assistant, and there's absolutely no way that I could do my job without her. And her contributions to what we do in the activities is incredible. Not just Nancy, but our head coaches and what they do, and our advisors. Quite frankly, Mr. Elstead, Mr. Kath, the rest of our administrative team. There's no way that I could possibly do the job that I do without those specific people. Our site managers, our ticket takers, our scoreboard operators. There's so many folks that are behind the scenes that people don't get to see. They go to a football game on Friday night and you have this big spectacle going on and just magically happens. Well, it doesn't just magically happen. There's so many people that are working to make that go behind the scenes during the game. And, from our maintenance workers, our field, Shannon Vick, and what he does to have our fields ready to go and our stadium ready to go. And a lot of times those folks they don't get seen because they're not out in the front. And they need to be acknowledged because it's a team. And I'll go even further and say, and I know I've said this before, I think I've said this in front of this group before, but being an activities director, it's a very unique job in the fact that I work so closely with so many different schools on a daily basis, weekly basis. I mean, we as AEDs, we meet once a month, and you get a very good look at how other school districts operate. You hear their frustrations or how things go in their district, their communities. And I am here to tell you, we are very blessed to live and work in Owatonna. People need to understand that. Are there things that we could be better at and we could do better? Absolutely, just like any community. But I'm here to tell you that Owatonna is a very unique and very special community, and people need to understand that. And if you don't have the opportunity to work and see the inner workings of other districts and other schools and the opportunities they provide or don't provide, it's hard to know that, because we all can, when we work within a community, your own weaknesses and your warts per se that we could be better at. And sometimes we lose sight of how special we have it and the great things that we have and the great people that we get to work with. Owatonna and the support that Owatonna gives to our school district, to our activities, is incredible. And people know this. And just are very, I don't want to say jealous, but wow, must be pretty nice to work in Owatonna. And I say to them, it really is. It really is. So
Thanks.
My acceptance of this award, and I try to say this to everybody, it's a shared award with Nancy, with our coaches, advisors, all the people that support and work together, because it is certainly a shared award. And again, I just want to express how grateful and honored I am to be able to represent Owatonna, work in this community, work in this district, because it's incredible.
Mr. Drillstead, any closing thoughts?
No, I think Mark said it pretty well. I mean, this was an incredible place, but when you have people like Mr. Ochterkirk to lean on, I often say there are two things that generally can end up on a superintendent's desk. One of them is activities that are special education, and we have two extraordinary leaders in this district that are managing those issues and leading those issues very well. And I'm very proud to work with not only Mark, but our entire team. But Mark exemplifies everything about leadership.
Mark, thanks. We know you have a basketball game to get to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5 tonight is public forum. Sarah, do we have any cards? No cards. Okay, we're going to continue on. Item 6 tonight would be reports. One item only in the reports area. Item A would be the audit. Mr. Elstad, if you would please do some introductions.
Yes, I'm going to ask Lori Bowles, our Director of Finance and Operations, and Mary Reedy is our representative from Clifton Larson Allen and our lead auditor on this report. And I'll turn the items over to them.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Elstad, pleased to be presenting the audit report for this fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. And Mary Reedy is an ultimate professional in her field of auditing for Clifton Larson Allen. And so I'm very happy that she's here to present this excellent audit report to us tonight.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Mary, can you pull that mic close to you?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yep. Normal, pretty much audit season, obviously losing Sarah during the middle of it, but she was able to wrap everything up for us, able to present tonight with final copies of the audit. Overall, pretty clean audit when we look at it. Audit opinion, we were able to issue a clean or an unmodified opinion, so highest level of assurance that us as auditors can give. When you look at each of these sections, your yellow book compliance, internal controls, single audit, and Minnesota compliance, no findings there. Within the single audit, that's your federal awards, we tested child nutrition and special education, and no findings overall. So overall, a really clean audit report. So we'll get into some of the numbers here. Fund balances of the general fund. We like to give you just a picture going back a few years. So 2020 is on the far left, and then 2024 is on your far right. There you can see your unassigned fund balance went up from last year. If you look down a couple lines, your restricted fund balance, you were able to spend that down, right? So within there, you spent down your medical assistance, operating capital, and LTFM went down about 3.4 there. So really able to spend down on those restrictions, which is what you want to do, right? You want to be able to spend that money on the projects that you have going on so you can put the rest in unassigned, which is pretty much you can run day-to-day operations. So when you look at that overall, if you look at all of your fund balances over your total expenditures, you're at 22.6%. If you take that out and just use your unassigned, what can be spent on anything, you're at 14.81%. Right now, fund balance policy is to have between 8 and 10%, so meeting and exceeding that policy. The next one is the student enrollment in average daily memberships here. When you look at this, you actually see that you increase by about 1%. I will say that about 90% of my schools actually decreased. So you're in the top 10% there that you actually did increase. I know it's just a slight increase, but increase is better than what I've seen there. So that impacts your funding here. So then your revenue sources coming in. Property taxes up from prior year. State sources, when you look at this, almost a $6 million increase. Again, quite a bit of additional state funding coming in. But a lot of that, again, is restricted. So for you to be able to spend down restricted and really put that in unassigned is pretty significant as well. Federal sources at $5.6 million. So when you look at your CFA, you have about $3.1 million coming in from ESSER. That is now gone, right? So next year when you see this, your federal is going to go significantly down. So just keep that in mind as you go. I'm pretty sure Lori has kept you aware of that.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So then we look at your general fund expenditures per those average daily memberships that we just showed. Here you can see in 23 it was at $13,723, and then 15,409 this year. So general fund expenditures per student increased by about 12.29%, and then we showed you that the ADMs increased by about 1.7. So this next slide shows you where a lot of those expenditures were spent. Expenditures by object here. Your largest two pieces of that increase is your salaries and employee benefits, obviously your biggest cost of the school. But when you look at total expenditures here, you can see in 2023 at about 66 million, and you went up to about 75 million this year. Then we look at your food service operating results here. Revenues at about 4.5 million, expenditures at 4.1 million. So you have about 1.8 million in fund balance. Of course, you'll try and work on spending that down over the year. A lot of my schools have this same problem, I want to say. Right, is your revenues, you just weren't sure where to expect it. It's all free. On the next slide I'll show, but you increase in your participation, right? So that means increase in revenue. Just not sure where the costs were going to come in. You can see the costs went up as well due to both inflation and that increase in participation. So then here, the meals served. So it wasn't 100% federally funded. It was federal and state funded, so a mixture of that. But overall, in general, 100% of free meals were served. So 553,000 compared to about 490,000 last year. Community Service Fund, here's your operating results. Revenues at about 3.6 million, expenditures at 3.6. So pretty much stayed right on 1.8 million in fund balance. So when you look at community service funds, you have about 4 or 5 pots within there. All of those are positive as well. So really each program is taking in the revenue it needs to operate that program in full. So just to give you a high view of the expenditures per ADM comparison here, really when you look at this, pretty much similar to prior year. Nothing really significant that changed year over year. So any questions or comments? We did present a few bound documents for you to review whenever and then ask any follow-up questions after as well.
No, I would just say, the Finance Committee had an opportunity to hear this material earlier in the week, so I appreciate all your efforts, and it's a great result, and so we're pleased with that.
Anybody else? Mary, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we're doing well time-wise. We're going to come back to you. We're going to move to item 8, which would be the general information. Any board members have a question for Mr. Elstad or members of his staff as it relates to the enrollment report? Nothing there. Okay, we're going to continue on. We have time. Item 9 would be board forum. I don't know that necessarily we have anything. Were there committees that met? Yeah, there were committees that met. Facilities has not met since our last meeting, but policy, anybody from policy want to update us with anything?
Yeah, we did meet as a policy committee last week. We've brought a couple new fairly statutory change only policies to our second reading, plus all of the policies that we had presented at first reading last time. We did take a look. Elizabeth had raised some suggestions for policy, 522? Is that what the number is?
Yep.
And we considered them, and the MSBA model policy being in line with what the legislature's actually kind of passed. We just didn't feel that there was any change warranted. So it's just as it was in the first reading.
We also looked at policy 903 that was lifted up a couple of weeks ago by some community members, and did a deep dive into that one and had good conversation. And that policy, we believe, reflects the best available options for all of our students and keeps access and opportunity available for everyone. So we're going to leave that one as is as well.
And just so I'm going to interject, policy 903 is our visitors to buildings
Yes. Yep.
policy.
Yep.
It was addressed during public forum.
Yep.
There was a concern lifted up, so the committee looked. Okay.
Yes, correct.
And that was just review. That's not.
We
on the list.
reviewed it because there was concern, it was brought up, and we just believe the language in there provides access as well as protection for all of our students. So,
I know that's what the lawyers recommended was the wording to how it was.
yep. So, yeah.
Anything else for policy? Finance?
No, again, we met, the bulk of our meeting was focused on the audit report that you
audit.
just saw. So
Okay. While we are on board forum, this is an opportunity. There are two of us that are, this is your last meeting tonight. And if you don't mind, we'd like to take just a few minutes and recognize both of you. And I'll start. Deborah, I have great appreciation for anybody that steps up and pays the $2 and signs up to put your name on a ballot and be elected and to serve. And it takes a special breed of cat to be able to attend all the meetings, listen to all the information, process it, and it's very nice to have you to have been a part of all of this with the school board, and I appreciate the work that you have done. Eric and I started at the same time. We were both elected 12 years ago, and when Eric and I went to our first MSBA training meeting, which was up in the Twin Cities, and Eric drove, and I didn't really know him very well. And so as we walked out to his vehicle, I noticed that his truck had a license plate, personalized plates that said, "See if I care." And I thought, I don't know Eric, and he's a guy driving around with a vehicle that says, "See if I care." And in the 12 years that you've been on the board, Eric, I think you've done a spectacular job of showing the community just, in fact, how much you do care. And you are extremely well connected here in the community. I think that you have a very, very sensible pulse of what's happening in the community, good history. And I think that in the time that you've been here, you've been a wonderful voice for the school board and for the community. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Tim for some comments.
Okay, thanks for that. Deborah, congratulations on your service. I've observed that you've always had a heart for the well-being of the kids of this district, and I think you show that whenever you're asking questions. And I think that's a very important thing that we need to keep in mind all the time. Eric, as a fellow hometowner, I feel like I followed in your footsteps coming on the board 4 years later. And I know you're a huge advocate for this community. I love getting the reminder there's a football game and everything else that goes on here. And I just thank you so much for your 12 years of time here.
Thank you.
I'll echo all of these sentiments. Deborah, thank you so much. I will miss the adventures of your dogs. I'm not going to lie. So
Did Mark tell you I took one to the vet this morning?
yeah, I did hear that you were at the vet, and so I am looking forward to the rest of that story after the meeting. So yes, thank you for that. And Eric, thank you for your service and dedication and advocacy for our kids in our community. I very much have appreciated that over the years. So thank you.
Well, I don't need to belabor, because obviously I would just reiterate, but 12 years is a good long time. That's a real commitment to this organization and the kids. So thank you for 12 years. That's more than most. And Deborah, thank you so much for the 2. I think it's been 2. 4. Yep. Golly, where does the time go? See, it's amazing. And I do appreciate maybe kind of what Tim commented on. You know, you are genuine and you're passionate about what you're passionate about. So I appreciate that.
Yes, and just thank you for especially the work over the several years before I came on the board, all the work with the new high school And I've definitely been able to enjoy and be a part of all of that, but you guys did all the work. So I appreciate all the efforts and commitment. Thank you.
Deborah, board forum, anything to add?
This is not the last time you will see me at a meeting. I will be back. I'll keep bugging you. I'll call you first and ask questions and see where I need to go with things. But
Good idea.
get my 3 minutes worth in.
Kirk.
In the 12 years, met a lot of great staff, a lot of great administrative-wise and teacher-wise. Sat back and tried figuring numbers and figured I missed one regular meeting in the 12 years. And I think we've had 15 or 16 different board members during that period, which doesn't seem like a lot, but yet it does when you have a 4-year term. My mother and kids came the night before the meeting, and I think reality's starting to sink in for what normally pops up all the time for reminders. I got to shut those doggone things off because I got to figure out what I'm going to be doing.
On Monday nights.
But you guys will see me now and then on Mondays. I already warned you on that. I'll be in one of the corner comfy chairs on the other side of the wall, looking up at the two newbies. We get to call you newbies, at least for the first stretch. And I welcome you both coming on. You'll take the oath on the 6th, and just remember what you're doing when you take the oath and who you are representing the entire district. I think I'll stop or I'll start tearing up.
Thank you. Ayub, anything for board forum tonight?
Yes. This week and last week, me and Aaron had the opportunity to sit in on some of the advisory meetings with Mr. Elstead and the middle school students, high school students, and ALC students. I'll just try to go quickly because I know we have a presentation soon. So today we had the advisory meeting with high school students. Some key topics we discussed were classes and academics. All students agreed that the classes were progressing well and that they were understanding the concepts being taught. We discussed a 4-day school week and the possibility of transitioning to a 4-day school week, pros and cons of that. We discussed Compass homeroom. Most student feedback was mixed on its usefulness. Students thought that maybe that time could be better used as in addition to the already 50 minutes of Compass time. And then after that, we also had some facilities feedback. Some students suggested adding more garbage cans in the school parking lot. And then for e-learning and hybrid options, some interest was expressed in implementing e-learning or hybrid days once a week or bi-weekly to offer flexibility. For the ALC, we had a meeting last week, on Monday. Some highlights were class engagement, classes are going well, the students expressed joy in learning, and we're building strong connections with staff. And we also had another ALC, we had another advisory meeting, but this time with middle school students last week on Monday. Some highlights were preparation for high school. Students felt well prepared for high school and particularly valued their CCR class, that is college and career readiness. Students expressed interest in electives. There was enthusiasm among students to learn more about high school electives, and students showed interest in hosting a high school panel where representatives from diverse career paths could share their experiences, insights, and some advice for the incoming freshmen.
Ayub, this is all of what you and Aaron pulled together in the last 2 weeks from when we last met?
Yes.
We're going to be okay, folks.
Yeah.
Just look at our kids. We're all going to be okay.
Logistically, how did you pull that off?
Last week, Monday, we had a meeting with middle school students at 9, I believe, and then again at 2. that Monday, and then today we had a meeting at 2 p.m. with the high school advisory group.
Ayub, is there anything else that's new? Any other announcements? Maybe personally. Is there anything personally that you might have been recognized recently?
I was chosen as the male Excel Award nominee for Owatonna.
All right.
With that, you know what? We're gonna take up the administrative report while we're at it. Mr. Elstad, if you would.
Oh, okay, all right. I'll try to keep this somewhat brief tonight. I'm spending a lot of my time these days in legislative meetings, trying to organize our platform. I'll be coming back to you with all the finalized platforms. Had an opportunity to engage with Representative-elect Sexton last week, as well as with Senator Jasinski. And so we continue to work towards some resolution there and how they might be able to best advocate at the Capitol for the needs of our public school students in Owatonna. Quick reminder that we have coffee and conversation this Thursday at 8:30. Looking for a board member or two that would be willing to be part or just be present to listen as well in coffee and conversation.
I can be there. I have it
Okay,
on my
thank you,
calendar.
Jolene.
Yep.
I will double check.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Again, Thursday at 8:30. You stole my thunder, Mr. Sebring. I wanted to congratulate Ayub on Excel Award. That's chosen by coaches and so on, and I think he certainly exemplifies leadership at the high school. And certainly, I just try to stay ahead of he and Aaron when it comes to listening to students and hearing their perspectives. And I appreciate that this new report that you're going to start hearing from them will be that sort of capture of what the students are telling them. And I kind of just let them talk. And as an adult, sometimes we just need to stay out of their way. So anyway, it's been refreshing to have that. Real quickly, I think this is a real kudo to our district, but we are the United Way campaign, community campaign leader this year. And we indeed did lead this year. We had a goal set for our district at $15,000. And as we tabulated the final amount, we raised over $19,000 for the United Way of Steele County as a school district. I think that's commendable and certainly outpaced our what our goal was for the year. So thank you to our staff that participated in all of the events that went on to help support our families that are connected to the United Way of Steele County. Two other things. I want to publicly tonight thank Lori Voles. Lori Voles' last day in the district will be this Friday. Lori has provided a real steady and experienced financial voice in our midst. She came in kind of as a mid-year transition to us. And when somebody walks into your office that says, "Hi, I'm Lori, I have 40 years of school finance experience," you say, "Welcome, we'll get an office for you." But no, she's just been a complete joy to work with, a consummate professional, and has really set our path as a district, recognizing that all of these federal funds and things coming in are really hard to manage. And those of you on the finance committee fully understand that school finance is a animal that's hard to cage at times because everything changes and so on and so forth. But Lori, my sincere thank you to you for your service to the district, and as a friend, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And then lastly, I want to lift up Deborah and Eric. Deborah, I would share the comments that were made by your board colleagues. I appreciate your passion and perspective. Not everyone has to have the same perspective. And that's the beautiful thing about democracy, is that we have voices like yours and others that aren't afraid to share those perspectives, and I appreciate that. So thank you for your service to the board. Eric, 8 years ago, you chose a fantastic superintendent. I apologize.
I remember the interview.
Eric, I would tell you, my sincerest thank you to you for trusting me the last 8 years as your superintendent, but also the service that you provided through thick and thin. As I have reflected with a few board members about the last 8 years, It seems like 2.5 of them felt like 10, particularly during the pandemic when we were trying to piece together what we thought was our best next move with that. But I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the perspective that you brought and that you represented the voices of the community. And so for that, thank you. And thank you both for your dedicated service, because this is not an easy job. And for those that have ever sat as board members, they would attest to that. This is a hard job when you're trying to make decisions that are maybe not best for the few, but are best for the many. So thank you for that. That's it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elstad. With that, before either of you leave tonight, we'll get, Lori's here, and we'll get a quick picture of the existing board and sharing a gift with both of you. There's a bell and a lifetime activity pass for all the activities to make your way in to see. With that, it is 6:07. I'm going to pause the regular meeting, and we'll take up the truth in taxation.
In the audience.
Yeah. And we'll all move out.
Oh, we do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want another one? Because I have. Yeah. Well, here you go. If you need another one, yeah. Help yourself. You must have caught the same thing I did. Because, yeah. I know. Yep.
All right. I am going to begin with our presentation tonight regarding the Truth in Taxation hearing. This is for taxes payable in 2025 for the Owatonna Public School District. Okay. Nope, that wasn't it. Any suggestions? Oh, okay. All right. So we're going to go over what some of the requirements are. We have a truth and taxation hearing because it is required by state law. And we are within the time frame. It has to be held between November 25th, December 30th at 6 p.m. or later. It can be part of a regular scheduled board meeting, must allow for public comments, and may adopt the final levy at the same meeting. Another requirement of the Truth and Taxation hearing is that we have information on the current budget and the proposed property tax levy. There, I just had to hit the button harder. Okay, some of the components. Background information on school funding, very exciting. District budget, and of course, proposed taxes for payable 25, and then public comments is part of it as well. So we're going to start with the Minnesota legislature and how they have identified some requirements. Minnesota's Constitution, Article 8, or that's 13, excuse me, Uniform System of Public Schools, and you can read that there. It's very important phrase there, government depending mainly upon the intelligence of the people, it is the duty of the legislature to establish a general and uniform system of public schools. That's a very important phrase there. The legislature shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise. And you can see the rest there. As a result, the funding is highly regulated, absolutely. So the state sets formulas that which determine the revenue. Most of our revenue is based on a specific amount per pupil, and we are funded on the number of students that we serve, and there's a component regarding resident students. Tax policy for local schools is a component that the state sets. They also identify a maximum authorized property tax levy, where districts can choose to levy less on a particular line item, but cannot be more than authorized by the state unless approved by the voters in November. An example of voter approval would be an operating referendum, for example. or even like a building bond is another public vote, for example. Gen Ed formula allowance. This is a really interesting data set. You'll see in the chart there. It illustrates the challenge that we have here in Minnesota. So as you know, we have inflation that impacts all of us, but the challenge for public schools in Minnesota is that the Gen Ed formula in Minnesota has not kept pace with inflation. And you'll see that in the comparative in the 2 lines in the graph. And so unfortunately, we suffer as a public entity, as a public school, because our funding has not kept pace with the inflation that we've seen that come through on our expenses. So for example, the pre-pupil allowance for fiscal year 2024-25 of $7,281 would need to increase by another $1,364 or 18.7% to keep pace with inflation since the 2002-2003 year. And so that is a really great way to illustrate the challenges that all public schools in Minnesota face. And according to the Department of Education, and just kind of a highlight overall for all public schools in Minnesota, the 2023 fiscal year costs of providing programs were underfunded statewide by $726 million. So that was FY23. Even with the current recent funding, costs will be underfunded by $455 million statewide by FY27. So even though with the last legislative session, they did greatly improve our funding in a couple different categories. They greatly improved special ed, aid, as well as the Gen Ed formula. There was some improvement there, but it's not enough to address that shortage of funding, of adequate funding. So budget information that we're going to be going over tonight. We go over the current year budget. We'll also identify some final actual expenses from last fiscal year and the proposed levy for pay 25. So in the district funds, we have different categories of funds. The general fund is our main fund. That's where our main operations are. You know, that's where most of our staff is charged, where supplies for students, textbooks, etc. Even in the general fund, we have capital improvements for our buildings, such as operating capital, and long-term facility maintenance expenditures are in the general fund. Other funds within our district financials are food service, community service, building construction, debt service, and internal service. So this is a summary of what I call as a budget publication report. And this is a requirement that MDE has districts complete and publish in the newspaper, so it has been published. So on the far left, you'll see the funds that I mentioned earlier, and you'll see fiscal 24. So that is reflective of last fiscal year as we began that fiscal year. And then we have, in the middle there, we have 23-24 actual. So those are our actual revenues by fund and our actual expenditures by fund for last fiscal year. And then in the kind of the middle there in the blue, you'll see the final fund balance of June 30th, 2024 by fund. And so as a grand total, you'll see that, for example, all funds totaling as this fiscal year that ended in June 30th, we were at $33.1 million. And then going forward in the black category, that is just to highlight what the current year 2024-25 budget is. So you'll see a column for revenues transferring in, expenses transferring out. I want to emphasize these are budgeted. And then the far right, you'll see fund balance that are anticipated. So you'll see in the bottom there of all funds together, a $24 million fund balance overall of all our funds. One thing I want to point out is a couple things. So our building construction fund, you'll see we have, we're nearing the end of various construction expenses. Obviously, the new high school is complete. We're still wrapping up final expenses for the renovation that is now called the district office, which is a wing of the old high school. So some of those expenses are still going on, and so the proceeds from that bond issuance, those expenses are nearing the end, and that's why that fund balance is being spent down and used up per se. In the general fund, you'll see a couple interesting things that in the general restricted category, for example, that component there is, for example, the operating capital and long-term facility maintenance for maintaining our buildings. And we do have, in this current fiscal year, budgeted to repair the pool. And so that's larger than normal expense. And we also have some other categories of reserve that will be spent down, some fund balance like third-party billing will be spent down, et cetera. Another piece I want to point out in the general fund, other. So you'll see that we're going from a $12.9 million fund balance, and down to a 12.1. So what that is telling us is that this current year in the unassigned general fund, we are deficit spending, which means our expenses are exceeding our revenues by almost $1 million. And so that is part of the discussion we've had and continue to have of how to adjust our budget, and so that our goal is, of course, in the future that we would have a balanced budget where revenues equal expense. So that just overall gives us a summary of the financials. Again, all revenue, all funds for this current year is a $95 million budget. And the general fund is by far our largest fund, as I've mentioned. That comprises of 81% of the overall revenues. And you can see the other categories listed there in the pie graph. Then in the general fund, revenue, another way of looking at it, just zeroing in on the general fund. Again, that's a $77.8 million budget as far as on the revenues coming in for the general fund. State aids is a great share of our revenues, and that's almost 80%, you'll see in the purple. Federal funds at 2.7. So this, I'm just going to make reference here. You maybe recall the auditor talked about how federal revenues last year were higher. And we have $3 million of ESSER funds, that's a federal pandemic revenue grants, that have expired and dropped off. So now we're down to our lower level now of federal aids. We have local revenues that includes property tax, for example. And then general fund expenditure by object code. Again, our current budget is $80.3 million. And I just want to point out a couple things. So in the category of the general fund, area that we spend the most of our budget is regarding people. So you'll see that with the salary and benefit component, that comprises the majority of our expenses. I was just going to try to find a quick summary. Here we go. So salary and wages and employee benefits together, if you add those two, that's 81%. And we're in the people business. We're a service organization providing instruction to students. So our largest cost is for people. So that's typical reflection of any public school in Minnesota. You have other categories reflected here too, purchase service, supplies, etc. Okay, this is another way of looking at our general fund expenditures by program. This I always find very interesting. Again, that grand total is $80.3 million. And what you expect to see is that majority of our expenses would be for instruction. We're a public schools district. So between regular instruction, vocational instruction, special ed instruction, that comprises of 66.6% of our overall budget. But of course, other categories can be kind of a higher cost too when we're maintaining our buildings. So of course, between sites and buildings, that's operating capital, long-term facility maintenance is in that category. Pupil support services, for example, that is the majority piece of that, which is that 10.2%, is transportation, for example, is a majority portion of that. So these just break it down by those categories. Okay, so another thing to clarify is a change in tax levy does not determine a change in budget. So, for example, it all depends on what the state legislature has determined for formulas. And so some of these formulas were, let's say they, of a grand total formula, they determine a certain percentage of this formula is in the form of state aid. The other component is local levy. It can shift between state aid and local levy, but the grand total revenue is the same. And so just to point that out, most of the increases in tax levies are revenue neutral to us as a public school. And if we have an increase in tax levy, often we have a reduction in state aid by a similar amount. Again, as I mentioned before, expenditure budget is limited by state set revenue formulas and voter approved levies and fund balance. Okay, difference in levy cycle. So a school district, a public school district in Minnesota has a different, like I'll say, fiscal year calendar than a city and county. City and county, their budget year begins January 1, and 2025 taxes provide revenue for the 2025 calendar year budget. It's different for public schools. Our fiscal year, our budget year starts July 1, and so 2025 taxes provide revenue for the upcoming fiscal year, which is the 2025-26 fiscal year. And for example, for that 25-26 fiscal year, our budget is required to be approved by June of 25, the month before that first day of the new fiscal year. So this is, you've all seen your proposed property tax is just an example what a proposed tax statement would look like. So every owner that owns property would receive this with this notice, and on the notice it breaks down what the school tax, county tax, and city tax components arrive at on your tax bill. It also includes your property valuations. So I want to really emphasize that, because often if you look at if your taxes on your property is going up, you really want to look at that property valuation up in the upper right corner, the market value, because often a lot of your tax is driven by if you have an increase in your property value. A lot of that is a major contributor to what your actual tax bill is. So each school district has a limited authority to levy taxes. We've talked about this. The formula is set by state law and voter approval. This just gives a timeline of how the property tax, the flow of information. It starts with the county assessor valuing the market value on each piece of property. It goes, then the legislature sets formulas. Then it flows to the county auditor, who calculates the tax capacity on each parcel property. And Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits for each school district, so it's M/E calculating these levy documents. The school board sets the levy and goes through that approval process after the truth and taxation hearing, and then from there, upon approval, it goes to the county auditor, and they divide the final levy on the district's total tax capacity to determine the tax rate. So that's how the flow of information goes. So for our schedule, we had our, on September 8th, MDE did the first run, I'll say, of the draft levy limit, and then it was brought to our school board on September 23rd for the proposed levy, which they approved. Then the county sends out their property statements, their proposed property statements, and then tonight we have the public hearing, and then following the hearing, the school board will certify those final levy amounts. Then an overview of the proposed tax levy. So for us this year, Owatonna Public Schools, The increase in the school tax levy is 5%. Total dollar amount of that increase is $967,743. The changes by each category and reasons, I'm going to go over that in just a second. There's so many categories in the levy. It's a very complex report and very complex flow of data and revenue through those documents. But I'm going to highlight a few categories. So in the general fund, we saw an increase there of 5.9%. And probably there's a couple drivers here of this increase. Probably the biggest one is the category that says prior adjustment. It shows an increase of, on the far right side, you'll see $389,000 of an increase in that line item. And that has to do with, long-term facility maintenance. In the previous year, we had a credit on that line, and that credit dropped off, and now it's back to the normal level. And there's also a component that there's a inflationary piece on our operating referendum where each year that operating referendum amount per pupil increased slightly. And so there's very many ideas or line items here, but those are kind of the main ones that pop out. On the general fund, community service, that line item, that category went up by 20%. We have a school-age child care line that's new this year, but it's a great benefit of that program that is operated through community service. Debt service, you'll see in that category, that is going up by 3.7%. So we have a couple things going on there. We have the issuance of long-term facility maintenance bonds for an improvement project at the McKinley and the OEC buildings for HVAC upgrade. And so that is reflected there in that category of debt service under the long-term facility maintenance line item. And then at the very bottom, you'll see overall increase of 5%, as I mentioned. And so that's how it all tallies up. And I'm going to get to some interesting nuances regarding this year, regarding the levy. But first, we're going to just highlight, I kind of mentioned this before, in the general fund. We have the category change of debt service and the negative $125,000 under general. And as I mentioned before, health and safety maintenance is a big component of that. We do have a new formula allowance regarding LTFM is listed there at $380 per student, so it's formula driven. And so another thing I want to point out is that when we put the levy application together, and as we saw how all the numbers were coming together, we did decide to reduce the long-term facility maintenance revenue line item by $420,000, and we did that to give some relief on that total increase amount. And we were able to do that because we are issuing that long-term facility maintenance bond, and we're able to address many needs there with that bond, and that's why we were able to help reduce that line item to improve that bottom line total a little bit. Prior adjustments, I talked about this earlier, and that was that credit from a prior year that was dropping off, and so now it ends up being an increase on that line item. So many factors come into play for an individual when they look at their increase or decrease from year to year. Again, as I mentioned earlier, when you look at your tax statement, first look at changes on your individual property, then look at the total value of all property within the district. So we refer that to as our tax base. And increases and decreases in levy amounts caused by changes of state formulas, etc., are other factors. So all those components are factors. Impact of property valuations. For example, if you have two properties, both houses valued at $100,000, the total levy, let's say each property is paying $250, so that's a total of $500. That's nice and simple. So what happens if you have a change of valuation? Let's say the orange house value goes up by 10%, blue house increases by 25%. Their property value is now different. And they're also then the levy that's spread on them will also be different. where the orange house is going to be paying less and the blue house is paying more. Okay, so now we're on to the Minnesota State Legislature and laws that impact for payable 25. So one thing that is really a big component of our levy here is the fact that there's property tax relief that came through the legislature that impacts taxes payable 2025. For the first time. And so that's very good news. So, for example, there's a home exclusion to the benefit of homeowners where it impacts valuations between $76,000 and $517,000. So homes valued in that range are benefiting from this a tax break, I'll say. And so another component is ag homestead. So farmers that own farmland are also getting a tax break for the land that's valued between the 3.5 million and the previous limit had been 2.15 million. So they're also receiving so-called a tax break with this new formula. So there we go. So examples that I want to show you that, let's say we have some properties that have no change in value and how that tax rate changes. I'm also going to show you an example that's probably more realistic of showing a home that has increased in value over the last 4 years and a cumulative increase of about 30% increase in how that impact for those homeowners. So I'm going to go over these examples just so you can kind of illustrate this. I want to point out that these calculations were done by our municipal advisor, Ehlers, and so I thank him for that information. So here is a chart that shows the property values on the left. So residential, homestead, commercial, ag, and apartments. So for example, if you look, let's use $300,000 home, let's say. So you'll see from taxes payable 22 to taxes payable in 23 and 24, 25. So in kind of the light green highlighted column, you'll see that's kind of reflective. You can see how those taxes changes through the years. So for that, let's say that $300,000 home, in 2025 compared to 2022, the tax is actually going down by $299,000. But that is if the property value stayed the same through those that time period. When we compare taxes 24 last year to 25, if that home value stayed $300,000 exactly, then that tax is going down as well by 47. So that just to illustrate that is the impact of this new property tax relief that's coming into play. And so it just kind of gives you an example how that's impacting various different types of property. So here's an example of a $250,000 home on the left, and let's just use this assumption that that property value for all those 4 years, that home was valued the exact same, $250,000 each year. So what this chart on the left is showing that actually the tax rate went down. So there's one factor there is the tax base has increased as a whole for the Owatonna Public School, and therefore our levy is spread out on a larger tax base. Similar thing for a $300,000 home. The same scenario is happening. You can see how the actual tax on that home has gone down. Again, this is just reflecting no changes in property value. And we all know property values have gone up, right? But this just also gives an example for commercial property. It's the same thing, how the tax rate has gone down, our tax base has increased, so their taxes are being spread on a larger tax base. So this is probably more realistic. You can probably resonate with this one. So this is showing a house that's currently valued at $250,000 And they calculated on average, how the market value has increased over the last 4 years. So using that assumption, for example, a house currently valued at $250,000 this year, back in 2022, it was valued at $191,000. So obviously the value has been going up. This also reflects, shows what that tax was back in 2022. They were paying $993 compared to $1,086 this year. So this is a really good example for you to just try to understand how it might be impacting on your own home, for example. And then on the right shows a $300,000 current valued home compared to what it was in 2022. Okay, another piece I'm required to just inform you is the components of a homestead credit refund, and you'll see they're listed there. It gives some information regarding the homestead credit refund. Special property tax refund also is another required piece that we want to inform you of, and you'll see those points listed there. And then the senior citizen property tax deferral is another data set that we are providing information regarding. I apologize, I have a cold and my voice is starting to slip away from me here. So the next step is that the board accepts public comments on the proposed levy, and then the next step after that would be that the board would certify the 2025 property tax levy. Are there any questions from the public tonight? And in all reality, it doesn't. And that's why I showed the graph of a current $300,000 home, what it was valued like 4 years ago. So how the tax impact charts, though, it's how they are required to be laid out, where your list of property value and then what the tax is. And so that is the reason it's reflected that way. That's why a municipal advisor puts the charts together as they do. Any other questions? All right. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, it stayed on.
Okay, 6:39, we'll resume the meeting. Lori Volz, thank you very much. That is a wealth of information. It takes a lot of heavy lifting to get that information pulled together. I'm going to turn things back over to Mr. Elstad one more time for just some transitional
Yes, I
introductions.
was remiss in my administrative report. We have one of our new finance staff with us tonight. I'd like to introduce you to Linda Gunther. Linda comes to us with experiences with the St. Louis Park School District. She started a couple weeks ago as our controller and has been a great addition to our staff and just brings a wealth of knowledge, and looking forward to working with Linda. So thank you.
Welcome. We will move on. Item 10 tonight would be the consent agenda. The quick reminder, we are approving the minutes from November 25 as well as the personnel report. Any reason to pull anything out? We'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Eric, if you would, please.
Yes. Elizabeth?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jelaine?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I myself is an aye. 7-0 pass.
Motion carries. Very good. Thank you. Item 11 tonight would be a couple items that the board needs to take action on. Item A would be the audit for the year ended June 30, 2024. That was the audit that we just had the benefit of hearing about tonight. Would one of you please introduce the motion for this?
I move that the board approve the audit for year ended June 30th, 2024 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Had an opportunity to talk with Mary about any questions. Any further comments from the board on that? Okay, hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item B would be the tax levy certification. Once again, we just heard a very comprehensive report from Lori Voles on that. Would one of you please introduce this motion?
I move that the board approve the tax levy limitation and certification as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Once again, any further discussions? We have the benefit of Lori being here. Deborah asked a good question relative to taxes and home values. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item C would be policy revisions. Again, this is the second reading. We took up the first reading at the board work session last time. A couple of comments that were raised. Policy committee response to that. Would one of you please introduce the policy revision?
I move that the board approve the revisions to the policies as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I just would like to say, first of all, thank you for recognizing my comments in the policy committee discussion. And I just would like to take that policy out of the rest of them for voting. And I'd just like to read for the record that one of the things I had suggested about policy 522, which is the Title IX non-discrimination policy, was a basic statement just emphasizing protection of all students. And I just felt like the policy as it was written, even though it was modeled after MSBA's policy, was just left a little bit of room for possibly not protecting all students. And I just wanted to consider adding an extra statement about more protection for all students. So I am planning to vote no on that policy, which is why I'd like to separate that out.
Policy committee, you want to respond? I know that as you talked about that, you took into consideration what MSBA and the state law had to say. How about a response to Elizabeth's concern?
Well, I think it's, just as you said, it's following the law. We felt it would be not in alignment with the statute to include Elizabeth's statement. So we chose not to because we want to be in the right place in terms of we don't need legal action against the district because of a policy that we would enact that doesn't comply with the law.
I'd like to read the suggested statement just for the record. I suggested adding, quote, when making decisions regarding student participation in a given activity or sport, considerations will be made for the physical, mental, and emotional safety of all students in effort to prevent subjecting any student to more than de minimis harm. This consideration includes practice and participation in activities and/or sports and the use of facilities typically divided for biological male and biological female use. So just wanted to state that. I didn't feel that that was going against the law, but I understand the policy committee's decision.
Yeah, we had some discussion about what de minimis actually meant in the legal context, and I think we're all in agreement that that would put us in a legal jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. Things change in a couple of years, depending upon legislative action, then we'll revisit the policy and make adjustments accordingly. Absolutely. So
I think we really don't want to be a test case here.
right.
So
All right, so the motion has been made to approve the slate of policies as they were presented. Elizabeth is requesting that we would pull a particular policy out and vote on that separately. That policy, Elizabeth, is 522.
All three lines? Because there's three. 522's got three lines of policies.
Mr. Chair, 522 complaint form and grievance procedure are accompanying documents that go with as far as different forms and procedural items that we would need to follow to be in compliance with Title IX. So they're part and parcel to the policy.
Are you making reference to Eric's comment about?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I heard his comment. I know he was referencing those two items because they are linked
We have
to
three different
522.
policy lines of 522 that work.
I see.
I think what we, if I may,
Yeah.
I think we need a motion from Elizabeth to pull out the 522 and the 2 attachments from the regular agenda, then we can handle that separately, and then we can move back to the others.
Actually, we need a friendly amendment to Jolene's motion to approve the slate. So Jolene, if you would you reintroduce, would you make a friendly amendment to your motion that eliminates anything relevant to policy 522?
Yep, I move that the board approve the revisions to the policies as presented with the exception of policy 522 and its 2 accompanied attachments.
All right.
Second?
And Lori seconded that. Any further discussion?
And we're just voting on pulling those 2 out, those 3 documents out.
Correct. Go ahead.
Point of order. You are voting to approve the other policies minus the 522 and their attachments.
Correct.
Yes, correct.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Jolene, if you would, please.
I move the board approve the revisions to policy 522 and its 2 affiliated forms as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. That motion carries as well. Thank you. That takes care of policy revisions. Item D would be the Bridge Street property. Mr. Elstad, could you give the board a quick summary of where we are with the recommendation?
If you remember, members of the board, you were presented at our most recent work session and actually closed session as we discussed the potential sale of the property of our Bridge Street property. Within that, there was a recommendation that came forward from the Facilities Committee that we indeed lifted up and look for a realtor to assist us in the sale of that property. We did set a timeline for those proposals to come forward. We received 2 proposals. After discussion at our most recent Facilities Committee meeting, I believe it was a consensus of the Facility Committee that we lift up the Hamilton Real Estate Group as the group that would best represent based upon 2 criteria, one of which was the overall price or the fees that were associated, and secondly was the body of work and other commercial properties that had been represented by the Hamilton Real Estate Group.
Then following that up, facilities meeting met. We talked our way through everything. I think largely the facilities committee was uniform in the recommendation that we would take the proposal from Mac Hamilton. You have the motion?
Yep.
By chance. So with that, I'm going to ask Eric to please introduce the motion.
I move that the board approve the Hamilton Real Estate Group as the commercial real estate firm to sell the former district office building located at 515 West Bridge Street in Owatonna, Minnesota.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I have a quick question, and I won't hold them to this, but building of this size in our community, price point, average time frame to sell. And this is average, Josh.
Average, there's
Did
really,
they say?
I don't
Or
really
it's-
know. It just depends upon, in another, the conversation that the board facilities committee had was how many potential buyers might there come to market?
Okay.
Potentially using one of the other real estate firms that were represented in the proposals. There's a fair chance that it could sell pretty quickly and probably an equal chance that it might sit on the market. Obviously, as a school district, there's a motivation for us to release that property, to release us from utility costs moving forward and things like that. So the real estate group that you're considering approving feels like the property could move relatively quickly.
Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
And with that, neither of the proposals that came forward, neither of them made any mention of potential buyers that we're
that's correct.
awaiting. So
Yep.
it's a real estate transaction.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other comments? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Finally, gifts to the district. Mr. Elstad.
Tonight, we have a number of gifts, and I just did a little simple math here. If you consider the gifts that have been given to our music department tonight, they total $11,925 for a number of different things. And again, our music boosters of Owatonna have made some significant contributions to our music programs, including some money set aside, just over $7,000 for new choir robes. And again, we're very fortunate to have a robust music program in our community, and the music boosters certainly help us to keep that momentum moving forward.
Would one of you be kind enough to introduce this last motion for us?
Go ahead.
Nope, ladies first.
I move that the board approve the resolution for acceptance of gifts as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor with an aye?
Aye.
Roll call.
Oh, that is correct.
Good thing Eric's still here.
I know.
Everyone was excited though to vote for it. Any
Go ahead.
discussion?
Any further discussion?
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Deborah?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Jelaine?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I myself's an aye. 7-0 pass.
Carries. Thank you. Item 12, I'll make the motion that we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor with an aye? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Good meeting. Thanks, folks.
Is there a picture?